Chapter 21. After the Fire. Dawn came slowly, filtered through the canopy like a veil of gold. Light slid along the damp trunks and spilled into the small clearing where Alden knelt, motionless, with Eärendil driven into the soft earth. The blade's tip, buried in moss, released a faint vapor, barely visible, as if it were breathing. Alden's palms rested on the hilt. His breathing searched for a rhythm it could not quite find. At the edge of the clearing, almost hidden among the tall ferns, Lyanna watched in silence. There was no hardness in her stance, only absolute focus, the kind of attention learned when survival depends on catching the smallest mistake in another. The forest remained still, expectant. Alden closed his eyes and descended inward, following the path she had taught him, past the noise, the memories, the fear, until he reached the ember, the mark, that burning point that never slept, that always demanded more. At first he felt only a warm pulse in his chest, beating beneath his ribs like a second heart. The air around him rippled, thick, charged. Dry leaves trembled and lifted into slow spirals, suspended mid-breath. A faint glow began to creep along Eärendil's blade, living red, primordial, as if the sword itself were waking. Lyanna took a step forward, almost imperceptible. "You're inside it," she said, her calm carved from stone. "Hold the channel. Take the fire. Don't let it take you." Alden tightened his grip. Heat surged up his arms, still manageable. He could feel the underground current beneath his being, vast, feral, yet obedient for a moment. That moment did not last. First came a shadow, then a flash. Then the images tore him open from within. Kaelor kneeling, moonlight on his blood, the black arrow slipping out of the dark, the second burying itself in his thigh, the soundless scream, steel-piercing flesh, the fall. He tried to drive it away, to close the door, but Hearthglen followed close behind, homes devoured by flame, the stench of burning wood, Elena's weight in his arms, her last breath trembling against his neck. A dull roar rose from the mark. Heat exploded outward in a silent blast. The air in the clearing turned incandescent. The suspended leaves ignited before falling as ash. The moss beneath his knees blackened and smoked. Eärendil became a shard of pure fire, a red lightning strike that flooded the clearing with near-blinding light. Lyanna felt the heat shove her back. "Alden!" she shouted. He did not seem to hear her. His eyes had turned to molten amber, twin open torches. The crimson aura around him vibrated in the air, warping the very edge of the forest. The ember had become a devouring blaze. Lyanna advanced despite the heat. Her voice cracked like a whip. "Alden, look at me!" The name cut through the fire, or perhaps through the memory feeding it. The glow faltered and went out. Instantly, as if someone had torn the soul from the flame, the air snapped back to its natural cold. The light collapsed inward. Eärendil ceased to glow, the blade returning to dull, silent steel. Alden collapsed onto his hands, gasping as if he had climbed an entire mountain without rest. Lyanna dropped to her knees beside him, still catching her breath. "I'm fine," Alden said before she could speak, but his voice belonged to a man on the edge of losing consciousness. "Alden!" Lyanna gently closed her hand around the hilt and eased it aside. This time it was stronger. "What did you see?" He swallowed. His jaw tightened. "The same things," he said at last, hoarse. "The same memories, but each time they're more real. Like I'm there again, like I never left." Lyanna lowered her gaze. She knew that kind of pain too well. "It's normal," she said, steady but gentle. "I spent years, whole years, learning not to let pain feed my magic. You've had weeks, Alden. The mark seeks your deepest wound. It will try to swallow you again and again, until you learn to say no." Silence returned to the clearing, broken only by the distant song of a bird. Alden sank onto a fallen log. Luthera, who had watched from the shadows like a living statue, approached and rested her massive head against his knee. Her amber eyes, deep, feral, met his with a loyalty that almost hurt. Alden laid a hand on her back and breathed deeply. "I have to control it," he said. "If I don't, everything we planned will turn to ash. Everything, including them." Leanna studied him for a long moment. Worry lived in her eye, and conviction. "You will," she said, with a softness she reserved for no one else. "But not today. If you keep forcing the mark in this state, it will break you from the inside." Alden gave a brief, fractured laugh. "Rest. Right. Sounds easy when you say it." Leanna tilted her head, the corner of her lips barely curved. "I didn't say it was easy. I said it was necessary." Alden looked down at the sword. The blade was cold, inert, as if it had not burned moments ago, as if it did not hold the same flame that had reduced an ancient monster to cinders. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted. "No one ever is," she replied. "But Kalor believed you could be, and he wasn't a man easily convinced." The name struck him. Alden closed his eyes. "I know," he nodded. "And because of that, I can't fail them." Leanna reached out and touched his shoulder, a rare gesture for her, almost shy. "You won't." The dawn finally poured through the branches, bathing the clearing in warm gold. Luthera lifted her head and scented the air. Something distant, perhaps a memory, perhaps a premonition, made her fur bristle for an instant. Alden drew a deep breath, letting the cold air clear the invisible smoke in his chest. He had failed to control the fire, but he was still alive. And as long as he lived, he could try again. Leanna rose to her feet. "Come on. Doran will want to move camp as soon as he wakes." Alden nodded, though his muscles trembled. "Yes, let's go." He stood slowly. Arundel flared for a heartbeat as he took it again, a red pulse beneath the surface, but this time faint, controlled. Alden felt it, and for the first time since Kalor's fall, a different spark ignited within him. Not rage, not pain, but determination. 3 days earlier, dawn had only begun to filter through the trees when Alden, Leanna, and Luthera returned to the clearing. They walked in silence. Above them, the small primordial hawk glided in a smooth arc and settled on a low branch, releasing a brief click that broke the stillness without disturbing it. The fire was still alive, consuming the last threads of night. The embers pulsed like a weary heart, and the smoke dissolved into the cold air. Beyond the trees, the river murmured, eternal, as if its voice had followed them since their flight from Rivershade. Sarah looked up first. Kyle followed a second later, his eyes shadowed by something no longer mere exhaustion. Doran, kneeling by the fire, stopped checking the edge of his axe and frowned. "Where were you?" he asked bluntly. "I needed to think," Alden replied. He had barely finished speaking when Kale stepped forward. "Alden, what do we do now?" The silence stretched between them. Alden looked at each face in turn. Kyle, shoulders tight, Sarah, unmoving, Doran, solid, Leanna, alert, as if still listening to echoes of the conversation they had just had. Luthera sat beside him without a sound, a living shadow. He drew a deep breath. The air tasted of smoke and loss. "We continue," he said. The word dropped like a stone into frozen water. Kyle exploded. "We continue?" His voice shook. "We should go back, hunt those bastards down one by one. For Kalor," Sarah spoke before the fury could burn hotter. "Then Kalor died for nothing." She did not raise her voice, but the edge cut deeper than a shout. Kale turned on her, restrained violence tightening his jaw. "And what do you suggest?" he spat. "Keep running like rabbits?" "I suggest surviving," Sarah replied, firm, "which is exactly what he asked of us." Kale was about to answer, but Doran cut in. The dwarf set aside the whetstone and rose with a sigh that seemed drawn from an ancient cavern. "Lad," he said, his voice rough from too many battles, "I understand you, and if I could, I'd gut every ghoul from groin to throat, every last one." Fire hardened the shadows on his face. "But the old man spent 20 years teaching you to use your heads, not just your hearts. He wanted you to be more than soldiers. He wanted you alive." The words struck the clearing like an axe blow. Kyle clenched his teeth, and the rage drained out of him. He collapsed beside the fire, covering his face with his hands. Silence returned, heavy but different, no longer sharp, but grief. Alden breathed, and something in the air seemed to breathe with him. "We finish what he started," he said. We seek the relics. That's what Selenia told us before she vanished. That's what Malaran said in the forest of Myranthel. Lyanna raised her head, firelight caught in her eyes. Which one first? Durvak in Thar'Zul, or Lumara in the Tower of the Ancient Mages in Valdara? Alden answered without hesitation. The tower. We're closer. 2 days at most. Kyle lifted his head. The rage was gone. Only calculation remained. Tactical mistake. All eyes turned to him. Galathor isn't stupid, he continued. After Rivershade, he'll know the tower is the obvious move. He'll be waiting for us there, cage wide open. Sira arched an eyebrow. Then, Cal straightened, as if grief had found a purpose. Thar'Zul, longer road, harder climb, but the dwarves hate Galathor more than anyone. If there's a place to find allies, it's there. Doran snorted, not mockery, but bitter memory. The last time dwarves and men fought side by side was the Alliance of Arendor, he said. Over 200 years ago. Since then, closed gates, old grudges. Mountains don't forget. Cal held his gaze unflinching. Then we'll open them, he said. Or die trying, because anything else, he looked at Alden, is just dying more slowly. Wind whispered through the pines, hollow, ancient, as if the mountains themselves were listening. Alden stood. He did not look like a hero, nor a chosen one. He looked like a tired young man who remained standing anyway. He adjusted his cloak. Beneath the cloth, the mark pulsed with a faint glow. Thar'Zul it is, he said. Sarah rose without a word. Doran took up his axe. Lyanna moved with calm purpose. The hawk released a sharp cry. Luthara straightened, ready. Cal was last. He ran a hand over his face and looked at Alden with something complex. Pain, yes, but also loyalty and fire. The camp vanished in minutes. Scattered ashes, erased tracks, silence restored. Alden moved first, northeast, toward Thar'Zul, toward the mountains, where the wind smelled of snow and iron, and old grudges slept like giants of stone. Dawn began to tint the horizon with a soft amber glow, the same color that 3 days later would shine in the bearer's eyes when the fire nearly consumed him. Darkness did not fall. It slid in, thin as oil over stone. Varric blinked and the corridor vanished. There was no jolt, no sense of travel. He simply found himself standing in the throne room of Elendor, as though torn from one thought and cast into another. The hall was as he knew it, tall, severe, built of polished black stone, lit by reddish torches that neither crackled nor gave off heat. But this time there was something else, a heavy, expectant silence, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Galathor sat upon his throne, not the monster of legend, but the king, upright, motionless, his right hand resting on the black scepter. The metal seemed to absorb light, not through obvious magic, but with an almost physical gravity. When he spoke, his voice did not echo. It fell, precise, like a stone dropped into water. Rivershade burned, but the bearer lives. Varric inclined his head slightly. Where? Galathor lowered his gaze for a moment, as though listening to something no one else could hear. When he spoke again, there was no drama in it. Somewhere in Valdara, perhaps closer than is convenient. A brief silence, calculation in the gloom. Your orders, my lord? Varric asked. Galathor set the tip of the scepter on the lower step. He did not strike it. There was no need. The sound that followed was soft and dry, like a lock clicking into place. Riven will go to the Tower of Lumara, he said. Take the sorceress with him. Varric frowned, not in defiance but caution. Riven is loyal, he said, but his honor... Galathor lifted his chin slightly. I know him. That is why I send him. The general did not fully understand. The king continued. Men like Riven obey because they believe obedience is just, that their duty sustains a greater order. His fingers loosened on the scepter. That makes them stable, predictable, useful. There was no contempt, no admiration, only fact. Do you believe he will succeed? Varric asked. Galathor exhaled through his nose, almost weary. He believes in duty more than in himself. That is enough. Silence returned. The torches trembled, as if an unseen wind passed between them. Varric allowed himself one final doubt. And if the bearer suspects? If he does not come? Galathor rested the scepter against the throne with a gentle scrape that made the hall's foundations hum. It was not magic. It was authority. He will not ignore the sorceress, even if he suspects we are waiting. Youth is noble and reckless. The king's eyes gleamed, not with light, but intent. Riven carries something that matters to the bearer, something that could move him, if played carefully. The silence that followed weighed like a promise wrapped in shadow. He did not celebrate a perfect plan. He did not foresee victory. "Go," he said at last. "The board is set. Now we shall see who moves first." The vision unraveled, thinning like smoke drawn backward. A raven bearing a single white feather, silent until then, spread its wings from high in the chamber and crossed the narrow window, vanishing into the dark like a living shadow. Varric returned to the waking world without moving, standing in the corridor of the capital fortress of Valdara before the door to Riven's quarters. He ran a hand over his face, drew a deep breath, and opened the door. At the back of the chamber, behind bars of black iron, a chained woman lifted her head. She said nothing. She only released a brief, stifled sob that echoed against the stone like a promise. And suddenly the night grew heavier.